Welcome. This is David Boles, Human Meme. Today's topic, hate is made of small things. The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. Mark the music. The Merchant of Venice, Act 5, Scene 1. Ah, yes, the petty lies of pretty lives, as small things fester into big things that kill you. Why do we choose to hold on to that tiny bit of poison that can kill us over the long term? If we just spat out the bad viral, we would be able to live ably and longly together forever. But no, we need our hatreds. We want the festering. It is the infection that cries us forward in pain and despair. And if we are not suffering, then what are we really, if anything at all? There is no sacrifice or honor in joy. We are forbidden by the hardship of life to smile or to be seen being happy on the street. Because if your heart is light and your eyes are sparkling, you are to be mistrusted and openly abused. Because how dare you be content with a life that surrounds the rest of us for the drowning? Now, as you may know, as you have listened to this Human Meme podcast, I really don't like "I remember when" moments as examples or teaching indices. But sometimes looking back to define the future from the past and to understand where you stand now, "I remember when" may be appropriate for sharing and shaming. And so, I'll remember when with you now. Oh, and as a precautious disclaimer, we tend to hang on to the smallest, most pinning slights because they wound us the deepest and they last the longest. Now, major despairs and wrongs are easier for us to slough off because they are more universally shared, understood, and forgiven. But the small, the invisible, the indistinguishable, the seemingly inconsequential slight that is hidden within one and tended to over the years to a spiky reverence can bleed a gut for a lifetime without a moment of healing or reconciliation. And this "I remember when" is just that sort of gutting. A long time ago, when I was young and working in radio in the early 1980s, I had a boss named Brad. And our radio station had a new in-house radar system. Now, that's nothing new today, but back then, to have a special sort of Doppler radar that we ordinary, regular, everyday radio people could use to track Midwestern storms live while we're on the air was a major technological advantage in the marketplace, and it was expensive. Our new radar receiver, housed in the newsroom and not inside the main on-air studio, looked like a standard big and clunky old oscilloscope, and it probably was in a previous life on some level. The 5-inch display was dark green, and a bright green sweep hand would make circles as the weather view was updated. You sort of had to guess exactly where the center of the radar was and then kind of imply, by experience and reputation, how which view of what you were seeing in the sky before you related to the ground clutter below you. And because of that confusion between radar view and map, we, the on-air staff, would just sort of generalize without hyper-localization. Rain in Lincoln, storms coming up in Papillion, thunder boomers in Omaha. Working the overnight shift, I found it difficult working alone to run back and forth between the newsroom for the radar weather and the on-air studio where I was working, so I made a written suggestion. Using an incident report that was always read the next morning by the boss. And my written suggestion was this: make a transparent plastic street and terrain map overlay for the radar screen that we could hold against that radar screen and then sort of trace the outline of the storm with a pencil. And then we'd take that tracing back into the studio to share on the air with our listening audience. Precise and delicate and quick. Great idea, right? The street map overlays, I argued, would be the same dial-up scale as the radar, so we'd sync up the overlap and the maps with the live view. And over time, we'd have a hard record of the storm that we could also use to help track the storm system. I even made overlay samples using materials I had with me at work. And I wrote up my incident report and submitted it all to the boss for approval. At that Lincoln, Nebraska radio station, we had a weekly internal newsletter that was written by a staff member and then distributed to about 60 people. And back then, when I say distribution, I mean copying and handing out. We had no email, no fax machines, just hand-stapled and hand-sorted Xerox copies. Not a big thing, but it was a big thing because it was the only thing we had that was a continuous stream of information. The newsletter included lots of helpful information about the station and its peoples and policies, and also sometimes mentioned ideas submitted by staff that were then supported by management. Well, the week I submitted my radar overlay recommendation and the staff newsletter was published, I was surprised to read a long and generous paragraph explaining this new radar overlay policy that was geniusly invented by my boss. What? There was no mention of me at all? The newsletter gave full credit for the idea to my boss, and I could not believe it. I was around 15 at the time, and I hadn't tasted the burn of defeat or betrayal very often in my young life. And when I later asked Brad, my boss, about what happened with my radar overlay idea, he looked at me like I was stupid, and he walked away. And at 15, I got the message. My original incident report had been carefully placed in the circular filing system, a trash can for the modern virtual thinker, in case you don't know. And I felt for that first time the bite of an intentional betrayal, and it was cold against my neck. And I knew then, for a man to steal an idea from a 15-year-old boy was pretty low and petty. And when I happened to mention that fact to other people on the staff at the radio station, nobody cared. Likely because they had no idea what I was talking about, and because all the evidence of my proposal had been disposed of. And if it wasn't about them, then it wasn't about anything. The radar overlay system worked out well. The idea was adopted across our network of sister stations. Our weather forecasts were better for it. And so here I stand today, more than 40 years later, still steaming and wounded with blood pressure rising in my gut. And I'm just a bit still full of loathing for a man who pretended to be loved and who pretended to be a leader and who pretended to earn respect and admiration by stealing from a teenager. And yes, I know. Let it go, Dave. The past is the past. Be one with the world. And I humbly reply, no, thank you. I prefer not to. Some things deserve our attention and need to be remembered. And there you have it, the in situ example of how small hatreds become big things later in life. And there's no remedy for the expansion of this tarry beast over time. But acknowledgement of wrongdoing and apology for the error can go a long way into the healing realm. And if you have insulted someone or stolen an idea, always know they know you know, and they know you know. And be prepared for a back alley meeting one day, virtual or not, podcast or not, where your due will be fully promised and promoted, because the treacherous cowards among us deserve no mercy or care in execution, because the concocted and the phony die 1,000 times, while the rest of us, valorous or not, radar savvy or not, die but once for our honor, in the final glow of a green radar sweep. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.